And we welcome you to episode 4 of our podcast. You may not agree with us,
but
I'm Lowery.
And I'm Eric Thomas.
And the podcast brought to you in part by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. Whenever you need a plumber, you need to know this number, 304-253-HELP. And also being brought to you in part by Massey Power Sports. And you know, Eric, as we start this podcast, it's hard to believe coming up on the halfway point of the high school football season this Friday.
Yeah, time flies, man. Great Friday night lights have been happening, and you know, things really kicking into gear now.
Yeah, and a lot of teams really playing for playoff position, especially in 4A. We'll touch about that because we've mentioned it before. Every 4A team qualifies for the postseason, but for AAA and AA, I think, are the really competitive classes. We've got over 30 teams in each class. Teams are really fighting for playoff position.
Yeah, and we had a good one last Friday night in Coal City with Independence and Scott. I mean, it went down. Independence jumped out to a big lead. Scott came back, battled back, didn't give up, and it came down to the last play in the fourth quarter for Independence to secure the win.
Yeah, we'll touch up with that game in more detail, but we're going to start in 4A, and that's the Beckley Flying Eagles. And boy, Beckley, after losing to Parkersburg South, the game you and I did, they bounced back in a big way, and they hammered Bluefield 43-7 to go 3-1.
Yeah, and I think there's something different about this Beckley team. Even with the loss to Parkersburg South, I really felt that no moral victories, and I know coaches don't want that, but I really felt that defensively that they felt a couple plays here and there, they were right in that game. You know, losing that game may have spurred something for the rest of the year.
I think so. I think outside of Parkersburg South in that game, their first drive of the second half where they just took it right at Beckley and scored. I think outside of that drive, a play here or there, Beckley could have been right there or possibly even won the game.
Yeah, and the thing that impresses me most, because I went back and watched the Bluefield game as you and I didn't cover it, but I think this team, the takeaways, if you talk about the way defense is built, you want to take the ball away, gain those extra possessions. And a player that hadn't played in previous years that stepped up this weekend was Preston Clary. He had 2 big interceptions, and I really think he's growing as he's getting more games under his belt.
There's also a young man on the Beckley squad that you might know kind of well. He's got the same last name as you, A.J. Thomas, and he's really stepped up for him.
Hey, a playmaker. The thing I like about him, he's a gamer, and we had a chance to talk after we did the game. I said he comes to play, and I like the way he plays, and he brings attitude to the whole team, and the coaching staff, you know, from Coach Surratt down. I think they're really building something this year.
Yeah, and as you talked about, we weren't able to do that game, but it was covered by Video Productions. Bill O'Brien and Eric Dillon did the game, and I went back and watched a little bit of it, and Gage Price, I think, is really growing at the quarterback position, and we had touched on Landon Jones in previous podcasts, and I think Landon Jones played well as he caught a touchdown pass from Gage Price.
Yeah, he caught a touchdown pass, but in viewing that game, I just fast forward through some plays. He caught, one heck of a pass on an out route, middle second quarter, and got 1 foot down to like a toe touch. And we talked about him. He's a weapon. You can put him in the backfield. He blocks well, and definitely a matchup problem at tight end.
So Beckley's at 3-1 as they enter their bye week. This is a little earlier than when they normally have their bye week.
Yeah, but it probably comes at a good time. You know, you want to get ready for that final stretch, and I think you'd rather have it sooner than later.
Yeah, and now as we talk about that, Shady had their bye week after they played the first 3 games on the road. They went 2-1. They had their bye week. They normally play 10 straight, and then if they're not a playoff team, they really don't have a bye week because their season is over. But I think their bye week really comes at a good time.
Yeah, it comes at a good time. They had a couple injuries, especially at the quarterback position. But I think a big win at James Monroe and spurred the big win at Summers County. Couple that with a bye, you're really riding high. Anytime you can go in with 2 straight wins on a bye week, I think you can reset and look forward to these next games down the stretch.
Yeah, and Shady, all those games on the road, and now they have 5 of the next 7 at home.
And that's a blessing, right? But they got homecoming coming up, which will be Friday. So a lot of coaches, we talk about this, those superstitions.
Big distractions.
The big distraction. I mean, it's still a game. Just play it. But coaches worry about it a lot.
Well, and also I think it's Beckley's homecoming as well, coming off their bye week too. So, Shady will have a bye week, home game, homecoming, Beckley a bye week, and then homecoming.
Yeah, I know it's a distraction in this house, that homecoming. Well, that's for a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. The AA game of the week last week lived up to the billing. You and I were there to call it, and it was Independence beating Scott 30-24. Independence got up 30-6. Looked like Independence was going to do to Scott what you and I have seen them do to a lot of other teams like Barium, but no, Independence couldn't score in the second half, and Scott came roaring back, and Independence had to hang on to pull that game off.
Well, the two things you can say that both teams have: guts. I think the Independence found a way to win, found a way to get to that 30-6 lead, because we can say special teams, because they had a safety on a punt. They returned a kickoff, which was a big time change in momentum. And they also picked off a ball and blocked an extra point. So they found ways to really secure the victory up at Coal City.
That's right. You know, when you're not moving the ball as well in the second half as they did in the first half, you got to find other ways to stop the opponent or put points on the board. And Independence did that.
So, Mayor, you need to tell the viewers, though, we saw something, two things that happened in that game we've never saw.
Well, one of the things that I've never seen, and probably you've never seen either, and I was going to touch on that, and you were reading my mind. We've been together for so long, we can finish each other's sentences. But there was a pass interception in the end zone, and there was a penalty flag. And I went back and I watched this, and I think that the Independence crowd, not that the crowd plays the game, but you could tell the emotion of the crowd, and the players thought it was automatically pass interference on Scott. They looked like they kind of let up, and the young man from Scott ran it back 100 yards. It's officially 100 yards. He's actually 2 yards deep in the end zone, and as he's crossing the goal line, a kid from Scott hits a kid from Independence, clips him clearly in the back, and it's a penalty and wipes out that 100-yard interception return. If I was the guy that returned it, wait, I got to say this. If I was the guy that intercepted that I would go after that guy. That'd be a fight on the sideline after I just ran 102 yards for a touchdown, and you clip somebody at the goal line.
And what's funny is, so you're all into it. You're doing the play-by-play. I'm reliving it as it happened. And when it happened, you was like, well, there's a penalty flag on it. And I said, yeah, because a guy blocked someone in the end zone, folks, right at the goal line. So it's a spot foul. Calls the ball, pulls the ball back to the 12-yard line.
Right.
It started at the 2. I guess they call it at the 2-yard line.
Put it at the 12.
Put it at the 12.
And yes, they eventually scored. But the one thing I do like, and I think the officials did a great job, they got together and they picked up that initial flag. But I don't know if your take was the same as mine, but it looked like Independence felt it was going to be a penalty, and they kind of were like lackadaisical and let the Scott guy run that back.
Yeah, and that's one thing you can't do. If they're running, go tackle them. I mean, do something. But you're right. It looked like they kind of gave up around the 50. Like, well, I think.
Yeah, and the crowd. I know the crowd. Like I said, the crowd's not out on the field, but they kind of had the same sentiment. Oh, well, you know, he can run. He's wasting his breath because it's going to be called back. But that wasn't the case.
Yeah, that was one of the things I've never seen happen ever, and all the times I've been watching football.
But that's a good, big quality win for Coach Lilly and Independence.
Oh, it is, and hats off to that Independence squad, because I looked at their depth chart. They had 2 linemen go down. They replaced freshman linemen with freshman linemen. So that's one thing. The future's bright in the trenches for Independence.
Yeah, and Independence won their 3rd game in a row, and they go to 3-1. They got a big game coming up this week. We'll talk about that later. And then we take a look at Liberty, and Liberty kind of fell on hard times as they get shut out at home by James Monroe, 27-0. Now Liberty's now 1-3.
And that little Liberty team, they're battling, they're growing, but of course they don't want to hear this every week. They're getting better. They want to get some W's, and I just think they're real close. The schedule's pretty. You knew that James Monroe was going to come up here ready. That's a team that's always ready. And they've already lost probably more games this year than they have in the last couple of years this early in the season.
Right, they were 1-2 going into that game. They needed that win to get to 500.
Yeah, that was a must win game, and they came up here and they really put the goose egg up on the scoreboard down in Glendale.
Yeah, and you're right, because, you're talking about Liberty and everybody says they're getting better, and they are, but they want those to translate into wins.
Yeah.
I mean, they just don't want to hear you getting better.
I get tired of getting patted on the back. My dog, my barking dog, he likes for me to pet him, but he also wants that treat, right?
Yeah, and also if you go have a barking dog, you want it to bark, right? You don't want it just to whine. You want it to bark.
That's right.
All right, this segment, as all of our segments, are brought to you in part by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. You never know when when you need a plumber. So you better keep this number handy, 304-253-HELP, by Massey Power Sports. And right now, hunting season right around the corner. And we talked about this on previous podcasts. If you get a deer, you don't drag them out anymore. You got to put it on a side by side and carry and drive it out of the woods.
Yeah, and after you go by that, like, share, subscribe to this podcast too.
Yes. All right. So now we'll take a look at what's going on this week, and we take a look at the 4 Raleigh County teams. Of course, Beckley, we talked on it earlier. They have a bye week, and we both think it comes at a good time. Beckley is 3-1, and now if they have some injuries, I don't think they have any major injuries, but like all teams, after you've played 4 games, a little bruised and banged up, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, but you can also take this week as more instructional, hone things that you think you need to work on. And I know that line, they're really gelling and getting better, and I think you can just build on what you have. The capital that you gained, you want to make it even better coming out of this bye week.
Yeah, because on down the road, Beckley's got some really big games. They got a matchup with Princeton on the road, which is tough. They've got to go to Oak Hill, which is tough. And they do have Spring Valley and George Washington home. Those are 4 major contests for the Flying Eagles.
Yeah, and you say down the stretch, that's as tough a schedule as anybody.
Yes.
A lot of front-loaded their schedule, but this one, it's going to be a battle night in and night out on Friday nights.
And like I said, after the bye week, they'll entertain Preston, and Preston's a team that Beckley's had good success with over the last couple of years. But like I said, those 4 teams I just mentioned, those are really difficult games, 2 at home, 2 on the road.
Yeah, 2 on the road. Right in their backyard on both sides of Princeton and Oak Hill, but both of those communities will be waiting on the old Flying Eagles to come to town.
So we take a look at Shady. We mentioned Shady 2-1 in their first 3. They had their bye week this last week, and now they come home to take on a Pikeview team who's really struggling. You and I saw Pikeview. Pikeview is yet to win. They're 0-4.
Yeah, they're yet to win, but they put up a real big fight on the road at Westside. So this is a team that's probably got Coach Colacerto's eye now, but it's real hard. This is I think, the hardest part of high school coaching. Kids look at the records. They go, well, they played them and we did this to that.
Right.
None of that matters when it comes to Friday night. And I think that's the hardest thing in high school football is the mental side of it, to keep kids focused.
Yeah, because Pikeview played undefeated Westside, and Westside beat them 35-25, and that game was tight throughout.
Yeah, Westside had made 2 big plays late in the 4th quarter to win that game.
Yeah, and coming off a bye, and it's Shady's first home game. It's homecoming. There's a lot of distractions going on with Shady, but they do have, like I said, you've got trying to keep your kids focused, because you're right. Kids do look at the scores and they know Pikeview hadn't won a game.
Yeah, and they look at that and they think it's going to be an easy time Friday night, but don't lose your focus, Shady.
The game that you and I will have, Eric, will be at Coal City again. It'll be Bluefield against Independence. Independence 3-1, Bluefield 1-3. And you look at Bluefield, they definitely don't dodge anybody. They're in AA. They played Graham, who's really good in Virginia, and they lost that one. And Princeton beat them up pretty good. They pulled out a last-second win against Greenbrier East, and then they fell to Beckley last week. And then after you go through that gauntlet, here you take on Independence.
And the one thing you always say about Coach Freddie Simon, he will never make an excuse, right? There's a few coaches that we covered. None of those coaches make excuses. Either they won or lost. But as we stated, Independence is young. I think Bluefield, I know. I looked at their roster. They're young. I think three to four seniors on the whole squad. We had a chance to do their middle school last year against Park Middle School here. So think 4 or 5 of those guys are starting varsity right now for Bluefield. That bodes well probably in the future, but that's going to be a tough task going up Independence and getting a victory Friday night.
Right, because even though Independence, they played really good in spurts in that first half, they kind of sit on that lead, really couldn't get much going offensively in the second half, but they built a big enough cushion. I think that Coach Lilly wants obviously a little bit more balance and more consistency in both halves.
And this game will be won up front because having watched a little of the film on Beckley and Bluefield and some on Greenbrier East, Bluefield's going to spread you out. They're going to make you defend the field. But I think up front, if Independence can get pressure, they have a dynamic defensive end and down lineman. If they can get pressure on the quarterback, get him off his mark, they'll have a chance to pick some balls off.
Yeah, every game, whether it be regular season or postseason, whenever Bluefield has played at Independence, you and I have covered it. And you and I also went, when they didn't play one year, we also went to a scrimmage that was played at Coal City. So
the scrimmage you got ran off the field.
It was so you and I have been a part of this rivalry since, they'd never played before until they started playing in 2021.
And that's respect and hats off to Coach Lilly, because I remember him saying to this, and you're going to remember this. He said that after that scrimmage, he said, this is a team, if we want to win a state championship, we need to see how we match up against Bluefield, because this team's going to be around for it. And lo and behold, they met in the playoffs.
In the semifinal.
In the semifinal game. And, I'll never forget that call that you made on the interception going. It felt like the stadium, those bleachers were going to fall. It erupted.
Well, I never forget that day, too. It was the day after Thanksgiving. It was very cold. And Independence was down 20-7 at halftime and rallied to win that game.
Yeah.
And that's when they went to play for their first state title. They didn't win it that year, but they came back and won it the next year. But they had to beat Bluefield the next year, too.
Yeah.
Remember that fall rain game that you and I did?
Yeah, and if you think about it, though, that game preceded them. That got the ball rolling. Sometimes if you don't believe, once you match up and you get over the hump, everything's on the horizon after that. And I think that was smart of Coach Lilly to get them on the schedule.
Yeah, so you always got to be concerned with Bluefield's speed. That's one thing, no matter how good they are or aren't, they've always got good speed.
And that's when I'm talking about with space, that he's going to make you, Coach Simon will make you defend the field. Like if you miss a tackle, they could take it a house call. So be ready for that, Independence.
Yeah, Eric and I will have that on video productions. You can watch that this Friday night, kickoff at 7 o'clock at Coal City. And then we take a look at Liberty. They're at home, and we talked about it just a minute ago. Getting better. Can they get this one in the win column? Liberty, 1-3, takes on Buffalo, 2-2. And no, it's not the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, not the Buffalo Bills. But I think Liberty, this is a game that they'll have a chance to, get in the win column. Not saying the Buffalo, is a pansy, but I think they're down a little bit. They're usually a good single-A school, so I think they'll be ready.
Former Concord coach Bob Mullet's the head coach at Buffalo.
Yes.
And good friends with assistant coach Mark Montgomery at Liberty.
And it's funny you say that, because Bob Mullet played his old team from Van last week,
right,
and lost to them. So, yeah.
Right. So it's good to see that those two teams are hooking up. Podcast brought to you in part by Motley's Plumbing and Heating. You never know when you need a plumber, so you need to know the numbers. 253-HELP. And that's pretty much what it is, because if you got to call a plumber, you need help. Because I'm not a plumber. Most people are not a plumber. That's why you need to call people who actually know what they're doing, right?
That's for sure. I'm not messing around with anything in the plumbing.
Right, because your wife is going to tell you, Eric, you don't know what you're doing. You need to call Motley's 253
No,
help.
I'll
right?
tell her.
You tell her. Yeah.
Call
Well, when I
Motley's.
see Regina, I know how that goes. And also by Massey Power Sports. Yeah, I tell you what, if you try to tell Regina, you might have to get a 4x4 side by side at Massey's Power Sports and get the heck out of here, right?
That's right. That is right.
All right, we're going to switch gears to college football. The Mountaineers, wow, for the second time in 4 weeks in their both home games, they've had these massive long lightning delays. And, I didn't get to watch too much of the game, but you told me over the weekend that West Virginia did to Kansas what Pitt did to West Virginia the week before.
Yeah.
West Virginia was down, I saw 28-17 and rallied to win the game. It was 32-28.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, it was if you follow West Virginia, it was pretty much a mirror image of last week. We said the football gods, they hate us. And all of a sudden this week I was in love with the football gods, because Kansas left Morgantown the way the Mountaineers left Pittsburgh, feeling down and out, like they just gave one away. And sometimes you give it away and sometimes it's taken. I think a little bit of both happened in that contest.
And I think you would agree. I think that WU, that was a game they had to have. After that, they had that feeling of losing that game to Pitt, a game they felt they should have won. They really couldn't afford to drop this one and go to 1-3 and 0-1 in the conference.
And and then that was a conference game, and they got a bye coming up. But I'm going to tell you, it was a battle of attrition for West Virginia. They lost 4 to 5 starters during the course of the game at some point. I'm talking about, it looked like the MASH unit. There's stretchers coming out, people going to going to the hospital. It was a game of momentum swings, people getting hurt. It was a character win, and O'Neal Brown needed that. A lot of people said that he climbed out of the casket maybe for a week.
Well, the thing about it is, and obviously it may have helped him. I don't know. When you have a long delay like that, I don't know if there's any advantage or disadvantage to that.
Well, this time I think it might have been a little bit of an advantage because Garrett Green had taken a big shot, and right before that delay, and it seemed he kept waving off, the medical staff. He was hurting, so I think he got a chance to go in there and get
get himself together.
Yeah, a couple shots here,
a couple blue cans of Pepsi,
some Motrin, something. But he came out.
Yeah, whatever he got, it worked, didn't it?
Yeah.
So and West Virginia has a bye week, and now Oklahoma State and Kansas State play this week, and then West Virginia will go to Oklahoma State. And even though they beat Oklahoma State, I think a couple of years out there, overall Oklahoma State has been a tough place for West Virginia to win.
Well, that is a place. Old Boone Pickens Field. We don't fare well much there, but there's something that they have in their favor. Oklahoma State played Utah last week.
Right.
Rough and tumble game, 22-19. We watched a lot of that game too.
And Oklahoma State lost that game, right?
And they lost that. And now they go on the road to Kansas State. So if you're sitting back, they're playing probably the two teams picked to win the conference or those two teams.
Yeah.
So you could
that's a gauntlet for them to play and then play West Virginia after that.
That could be one of those. Oh, we got West Virginia coming. We own them, and you sneak in there with the win.
Yeah. All right, we're going to switch gears to Marshall, and I've got to tell you, Marshall hung in there against the Ohio State University. They went up 7-0.
That's where the game stopped, right?
Well, if it was Marshall, they wished it would have stopped.
Last time I checked, it was 7-0.
Well, it was 7-0, but I think the game continued, and Ohio State did win the game. But when it was 14-7 in favor of Ohio State, Marshall punted, Ohio State fumbled. Marshall had the ball inside the 10, and they had a penalty, and it nullified that, and then it kind of went downhill from there.
And I'm going to tell you, though, this is cliche, Marshall has to take this a moral victory because the other teams that came to Columbus, none of them crossed the 50-yard line.
They got crushed.
Nobody even got into the red zone against them. They said, we don't have any red zone defense stats for Ohio State because nobody's been here. You know what Marshall said? We're going to give you one because we're going to score. And then Marshall, it was 14-7 theirs. And this is what turned the game around. They punted. They forced a punt.
That's what I was talking about. They punted, and then they've recovered that fumble, and then it was a penalty.
But they had a legal procedure. They had enough men on the line of scrimmage. And then very next play.
That's why I say all the time, the little things make the big things. And the thing you and I talked about after the game, Marshall was not intimidated at all. They went up there and played hard. They were just outmanned. Ohio State's just got too many players.
Hey, so before we close talking about them, I got to give a shout out to Braylon Ward. You know him. You know his father, Ron Ward. He got in the contest. Not only did he get in, you're talking playing at Ohio State, and this is a redshirt freshman, played at Riverside. He got 2 tackles, 1 quarterback pressure, and I'm telling you, he was in the backfield a couple of times, so that will build his confidence, and I think that's what he needs. He's getting coached up a little more. I'm thinking, let's face it, he didn't have the kind of coaching he's getting now, and I think if he hangs in there, that'll be a name we'll say a couple years from now.
Well, and to play against such a blue blood iconic program, an iconic stadium like the Horseshoe, that's something amazing.
Yeah, because when they bring backups in, their backups are starters anywhere else they go.
That's right. And, for the people who are too young to know Archie Griffin, the only 2-time Heisman Trophy winner ever from the Ohio State University back in my day when you was just in diapers. I remember that back in 73 and 74.
It's so long ago, you can't even remember.
Yeah. Well, I remember that.
Did he wear like 40-something? What was his number?
Yeah, he was 45. I remember that. He was 45. Yeah, Archie Griffin. All right, now we'll switch gears to Virginia Tech, and they lost at home to Rutgers. And Virginia Tech, now they've got to go on the road on Friday and take Miami, Florida.
Oh, you know what? I think Virginia Tech is having the old Big East blues right now because Greg Schiano got Rutgers going there late in his Big East days before he bolted. And now you got Miami coming up. That's back-to-back what I call old Big East slugfest. And, Miami, they owe Virginia Tech a few L's because Virginia Tech really has owned Miami in recent years. So that's going to be a big game, a must win for Virginia Tech. They're reeling right now.
Well, it's the best start for Miami since 2017, and they had a really good year in 2017, and it seemed like that they kind of hit a skid, and they really haven't been able to turn the corner maybe till now. With the quarterback Cam Ward, the transfer, he's been outstanding for the Hurricanes.
Yeah, outstanding. Throws the ball from a lot of different arm angles, and I'm in the closet U fan. Don't tell anybody though.
Hey, I still have a shirt from the '80s, Catholics versus Convicts. I don't think I could really wear it now. What do you think?
Yeah, you get canceled.
Yeah, I don't.
You don't want to get us canceled.
Yeah, well, I don't think we can get canceled from this, but I don't know, and I wouldn't wear it on here, but I don't know where I could wear it other than at home, right?
That's right. Don't bring that. Don't wear it to this.
Yeah, I won't wear it. And we got a one final game of college football we have to talk about. What a monster game, Georgia and Alabama. And I saw this stat today that this is the first time since 2007 that Alabama's a home underdog.
A home dog. That's
that could be your barking dog, right?
I think that's the Nick Saban effect, though.
I think so. And, he took over, I think, right there in 2007. And I said, I couldn't believe they were a home underdog in 2007.
Yeah, when he first came.
Since it was his first year.
Yes, yeah.
But Georgia, Alabama, and the winner of this game is probably going to stake the claim to the current #1 spot.
Yeah, but I think when you go on the road, Georgia's stacked. They haven't played up, but they proved 2 weeks ago that it's tough to go on the road. Kentucky, they went to Kentucky and snuck out there with a 13-12 victory. So I think Alabama will be ready. The fans will be fired up. It's just tough to win on the road in the SEC.
And here's another thing. Both teams had a bye week coming into this game. So there's no advantage, disadvantage. I think it was great scheduling. It ought to be a great game. I would lean a little bit toward Georgia.
Yeah. Georgia, I would lean, but it's hard to go against old Milroe. That quarterback, he's a winner.
All right, now it's time to talk about the National Football League. As this being brought to you in part by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. Dial them up at 304-253-HELP and Massey's Power Sports. So, don't have much to say about last Sunday's Dallas collapse. Actually, they made a great comeback, but it just came a little short. But you got to figure that Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, they were 0-2. They couldn't afford to go 0-3.
Well, I knew they were going to come in, and I knew they probably would win the game. But it's just how the Dallas Cowboys, are getting embarrassed. And it was comical. It looked like, I'm telling you, I'll take Woodrow's run defense right now and take Beckley out there. And I think they could probably hold somebody 200 yards rushing in the first half. 230 yards rushing in an NFL game.
Well, here's one thing I think that probably bodes well for Dallas. Their next game was at the New York Football Giants, and Dallas has owned that series here in recent years.
Yeah, that bodes well. Now, also, I think it's going to be a much-needed short week. Maybe squeak out a victory, and then you have 10 days to fix some stuff. Soul search, do something, but it didn't surprise me that Dallas lost last week. It's how they lost.
All right, before we get into our barking dogs, I want to ask your opinion on this. Of course, I would think you would agree. Kansas City 3-0, best team in the NFL. You may agree. I think you would. Anybody that watches the NFL with Eric and I, Kansas City is the best team until somebody beats them in the playoffs or the Super Bowl, whatever that may be. But they're 3-0, and I don't think they played their best football. But now you look at the other 3-0 teams: Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Seattle. Is there any other 3-0 teams?
That's it.
So out of those three,
teams that can move to 3-0.
All right. Those teams are all 3-0. Mm-hmm. Out of those three teams, which one do you think is the best team out of those three?
The most legit team out of those three, I would have to go with Minnesota.
I would agree. Minnesota, because they beat the 49ers and they beat down Houston on Sunday.
And defensively, we had a chance to watch them, bits and pieces of them, and Minnesota's for real. If the quarterback Darnold doesn't turn the ball over, their defensive scheme, they're able to stay in it because of their defense.
And I'll say this, speaking of defense and the Pittsburgh Steelers, you can't say Pittsburgh without saying D, because their defense is real legit, and they don't have much, their offense grinds at times, but they've been able to get it done for these first three games.
Yeah, but that would be my next. If I'm going to buy, I would buy them too, because defense travels, and they have, in my opinion, the best defensive player in the whole league, T.J. Watt. He disrupts. You can say Bosa, you can say all these other guys, Bosa, whoever, T.J. Watt.
Hey, the one thing I know is, of course, that's the name of the podcast. You may not agree with this, but it seems like you and I do a lot of agreeing on this show.
We do.
That's because they might think
but
alike.
But our viewers don't. We think alike, but they're like, hey,
all right.
We don't agree
so
with
now
that.
It's time to get to our favorite part of the show, barking dogs. And, of course, For the last 2 weeks, I haven't had much of a bark. I haven't had any bite. My barking dog went down. The Bears, they lost. They were getting a point and a half. I thought they'd win straight up. They didn't. And you had Miami's a barking dog, and their quarterback got roughed up. And they didn't have a really
I was
good
going to
showing.
say, I went from Tua, he's out, to
Thompson, he's out. They brought in the
that
13 guy.
Don't even know who that guy is.
Yeah,
And that's what I said. My dog was in the pound last.
All right, so you're 2-1 with your barking dogs. Who's your barking dog for this week?
And this is where people are going to know that we don't talk about this.
Right.
So had a chance to assess it. And there's something you taught me over the years. Take a home dog. I'm taking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, getting 2.5 after that terrible loss at home, playing Philadelphia. I'm taking the Buccaneers to win outright.
All right, and I was surprised at this here that the Steelers are a 2-point favorite on the road at Indianapolis. Indianapolis got a much-needed win. I went against them last week and lost. I'm going to go with Indianapolis because I think Indianapolis is going to beat the Steelers this week and give the Steelers their first loss.
So there you have it, the Colts and the Bucks, right?
Yep, the Colts and the Bucks. So we hope you've enjoyed this podcast. You may not agree with us,
but
I'm Maris Lowery.
And I'm Eric Thomas.
And from Modley's Plumbing and Heating, we appreciate them and Massey Power Sports. Hope you have a fantastic evening.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe.